This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the MSI GE63 Raider with Intel 9th generation CPUs inside. So this is going to be interesting because I reviewed the Raider GE75, which is the 17-inch version of this relatively slim and light, but not psycho slim and light gaming laptop. So what's the difference? Which should you get? We're going to find out now. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing and analytics tools, Squarespace is the one-stop place to do it all. So what makes the GE Raider line so special in my heart? Well, it's because it's pretty slim and pretty light. Like I said, this is not a burden to carry around. This is not some behemoth of a desktop gaming laptop. Yet it's not so psycho thin and light like the Stealth and some of the other thin and light laptops on the market where cooling is such a constant concern and you're stuck with Max-Q graphics. For those of you who want the full NVIDIA RTX graphics experience and not the lower power Max-Q, you've got that with the Raider line. It's also pretty easy to upgrade the internals. Again, with the latest generation Alienware M15 R2, for example, everything except for the SSD is soldered down now. And even with MSI's own Stealth line, yeah, you got RAM slots and you've got SSD slots, but the motherboard is inverted, so getting to a lot of those parts is a real pain in the neck. Speaking of upgrades, our review loaner came from Computer Upgrade King, CUC USA. So if you're not the kind of person who likes to open up your laptop and do things like upgrade the hard drive, the SSD, more RAM, that sort of thing, they'll do it for you. But that said, you know, it really is awfully easy. Unscrew the screws on the bottom, pry off the bottom. You've got 2 RAM slots, huzzah. Nice times. And you've got an M.2 NVMe SSD slot for your boot drive, and you've got a 2.5-inch SATA drive bay, so you can go with the stock hard drive. 1 terabyte Seagate Barracuda 7200 RPM drive is standard on some models, or you can put a 2.5-inch SSD in there too. So nice. And also the Wi-Fi card is socketed. It's a pretty good card. It's a killer 1550i, which is really a rebranded Intel 9560AC card. You probably don't want to replace it, but if you're thinking about Wi-Fi 6 or something like that, you could do that. As is the rage these days with higher refresh displays, and this certainly makes sense with a machine with this much horsepower. 144 Hz Full HD matte IPS display is standard. We have Intel 9th generation Coffee Lake 45-watt CPU inside, 6-core Core i7-9750H. And for graphics, we have the NVIDIA RTX 2060, 2070, or 2080. Again, not the Max-Q versions of those. And our particular unit has the RTX 2070, which is a sweet spot. 2080, you're paying a lot more money for and not getting so much return on that investment in terms of performance, but it certainly is more significantly faster than the 2060, and you have 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM on board. So it's all roses and puppy dogs, right? We even have a per-key RGB backlit SteelSeries keyboard, and I love SteelSeries keyboards. Lots of tactile feel, good key travel, nice key return and bounce, and you can go with zone backlighting if you find that easier. You can do the wave, you can do the disco, all these sorts of effects they have going on, or per key and program it yourself. The one thing that's really shocking folks, is the last generation Raider GE75 I reviewed with Intel 8th generation CPUs had a Microsoft Precision trackpad, which was a godsend because MSI used to use the most god-awful trackpad and trackpad drivers. Guess what? They went back to non-Microsoft Precision trackpad drivers. This is a Synaptics trackpad, and they make fine hardware. And Synaptics drivers, and I noticed it right away. Sometimes taps didn't register. Once in a while, a folder didn't drag where I thought it was. It's not as bad as the MSI trackpad from, say, 2 years ago, which was an absolute disaster waiting to happen, but it's a disappointment. While we're talking about lighting, it's not just the keyboard, of course, and this is different from the GE75 Raider, where the 2 lid chevrons do not light up on the 75. They do a light show on the 63. Or you can disable the lid lighting if you feel like it's a little too boy racer for work or something. Also, we have the light up USB-A ports. I love this feature because often you game in the dark, right? And you can't find the ports. It makes it easier. So you got 3 options there. You can have that off if you actually don't like that. You can have it at medium brightness or at high brightness. So who's this machine for? Well, obviously it's for gamers with this much horsepower inside, but it doesn't have to just be for gamers. You can use this for content creation, for 3D rendering work, obviously for video editing, Adobe Premiere, that sort of thing. Web development, and speaking of web development, So you're a fitness trainer, a photographer, or an artist wanting to sell your work, or perhaps you've started a great new restaurant. You need a website, and Squarespace can handle it all. Website, domain name, e-commerce, attractive templates, and marketing too. Head to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/mobile tech review to save 10% on your first website or domain. And back to our review of the MSI. So, as a gaming laptop, it's quite good. The thermals on this aren't as good as the GE75 though, and it's funny how a little bit more room in the chassis allows for better cooling. It's not the miracle that the GE75 was, where I can be playing Battlefield 5 and see core temperatures at 85 degrees centigrade, which is actually good. Here we're looking at 95 and some throttling, but if you undervolt just a bit, for example, I use throttle stop and I just undervolted the CPU and the cache by 125 millivolts and 100 millivolts, and that dropped temperatures down considerably to the lower 90s where we weren't seeing so much throttling. So not as much a miracle. If you repasted this, you don't even have to go crazy with liquid metal, just a good quality paste. You could probably improve your temperatures some as well. Noise on this with Cooler Boost 5 cooling isn't that bad. Now you can program the fans and you can set them to just go max crazy. I actually do change the fan curves so at higher temperatures they ramp up more than the default on that, which is nice. And even doing that, the noise it's a gaming laptop. You're going to hear that air moving, but it's not grating, it's not room filling. You can still actually hear the speakers, so well done there. Ports on this, as you'd expect for a gaming laptop, especially a higher end one, are pretty good. We have USB-C Gen 2, but it's not Thunderbolt 3. That's a little odd. That's how MSI rolls with the Raiders. You've got, of course, USB-A ports, lit up in red, like I said. You have both HDMI 2.0B and a mini display port. You have an SD card slot, too, and, of course, your audio jacks. The display is your usual trendy 144 hertz display, and like I said, given the horsepower, yes, it can actually drive frame rates that high in some games, particularly games like Apex Legends. It's not super bright. It's 257 nits, and contrast is good on it though, 9:10:1. The rest of the specs you can see on screen. They're perfectly good. Now back to the GE75 Raider. So usually you don't want a 17-inch laptop because you say, I'm going to throw this thing in my backpack. I don't want it to have a big footprint. I don't want the weight. If you look at the two of them together, we have them both together here, the footprint is really actually very close because you have very small bezels on the 17-inch. You have big bezels on the 15-inch, and the chassis size isn't that much of a rewarding feature by going down to the 15-inch. Also, the weight, there's only like a couple of ounces difference between the two of them. Now, neither of them is very heavy. You can see the weights on screen. So they're both fairly portable, certainly for very powerful gaming laptops with full RTX graphics. But once again, it's leaning me towards that GE75 Raider. Big screen experience, better cooling, hey, and just about the same size. In terms of build quality, it's your typical MSI, a fingerprint-loving brushed black aluminum lid, a pretty decent looking, a plastic sort of bottom, lots of ventilation on. Excellent ventilation exiting from the sides, exiting from the back. They do that very well at MSI. You're not going to confuse this with a MacBook Pro or a Razer Blade, certainly in terms of looks, in part because, I'm sorry MSI, you're just aesthetically a little challenged always, but it feels like a reasonable quality machine. So the price on these, it's not cheap Cheetos. This isn't the most expensive thing they make, and it's by far not an introductory machine. Starts at around $2,000, and that gets you a nice configuration, which I hope it would for the price. So for $2,000, you get a Core i7 9th Gen CPU, you get the RTX 2070 graphics, a 512 gig NVMe SSD, 16 gigs of dual channel DDR4, 2666 megahertz RAM, and no hard drive. About $50 more if you want it with the hard drive. Now, if you go up to the RTX 2080, then you're looking at about $2,500, $2,600. So this is why I say the 2070 is kind of the sweet spot. You get a lot of performance there. You get the most VRAM versus the 2060, but you're not paying that much money for 8% performance improvement. Audio on this is pretty good, as it was for the larger Raider as well. We have two 3-watt speakers, which is a little bit more wattage than you usually see on a laptop, and we like good audio with a gaming laptop. You have Nahimic 3 audio, and you have a bunch of different presets there and surround sound, but even with Nahimic not turned on and doing its thing, it's pretty loud and it's pretty full. I mean, you're not going to have the bass of a desktop replacement 10-pound gaming laptop, of course, but it's pretty well done. And you've also got separate mic and headphone jacks for your super high-end headphones too, and this supports SPDIF. To take off the bottom cover, you basically unscrew all the Phillips head screws. One of them might be under a tamper-resistant sticker from MSI. That's okay. At least in the United States, that doesn't void your warranty unless you go ahead and bust up something yourself. Then they'll know you did it. So unscrew the screws, work off the bottom cover with a guitar pick starting from the front edge, working yourself to the back because the back wraps around a little bit. Yeah. You get the idea. So here's what you see inside. Here's our drivers for our speakers here. Just this giant speaker on it. They're always so funny with their branding. So you've got your stereo speakers and you've got 2 woofers as well. So cool that. And our heatsink solution here, nice. We've got plenty of nice copper pipes going on right there and some beefy heatsink action. Now at last, a tripod heatsink for our CPU here. I always like to see 4 screws, but what can you do? Suffice to say that just by being a little less skinny, we can have something like readily accessible internals and actually a pretty good heatsink setup, which is why the temperatures are high, but pretty manageable just with something like using throttle stop to undervolt the CPU. This is the pathetic 51 watt-hour battery here, which, yeah, I mean, that's what you'd find in a beefier 13-inch Ultrabook, so don't expect fantastic battery life. We have NVIDIA Optimus switchable graphics here, so it can switch between your NVIDIA RTX graphics and Intel UHD 630 graphics, but this is about a 5-hour laptop unplugged. If you're not doing any heavy lifting to engage the GPU, office work, a little streaming Netflix, you get the idea. This comes with a 280-watt charger, which is perfectly adequate. You get that whether you get the RTX 2070 or the 2080 model. You do get a 180-watt charger if you go with the RTX 2060 card, which makes sense in terms of power requirements. You won't have this discharge while you're gaming, that's for sure. So here are our 2 RAM slots and DDR4 2666 megahertz RAM, and all of this has been upgraded by Computer Upgrade King, so this isn't the stock stuff you're seeing here. They've upgraded this to 32 gigs of RAM. They put in this 1 terabyte M.2 PCIe NVMe SSD, and they put in a 2 terabyte Seagate 7200 RPM drive right over here. So hard drive bay, M.2 SSD. Oh, hey, and looky, a second M.2 SSD slot here. So you can have a total of 3 drives inside of this fairly compact machine. Nice. And here is our killer socketed Wi-Fi card. So if you wish to upgrade it later, you could. So that's the GE63 Raider, the smaller Raider in the pair. And as you can guess by now, I would go with the 17-inch. I mean, in fact, I personally did go with the 17-inch because the size and the weight are so close anyway. You're going to get a little bit more room for cooling, which really does make a difference, having tested both of these machines, and a bigger screen and all that sort of thing. Not that this is a bad machine if you look at it without thinking about the GE75, though. Compared to MSI's own Stealth line, for example, this one is very easy to open up and upgrade and service. That's pretty nice. And you've got RAM slots, you've got a hard drive bay, things that you won't find in the competition, for example, even the new Alienware M15R2, where everything just about is soldered down on board. So it's not that it's a bad machine. I just think that the 17-inch version makes more sense. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and a thumbs up if you like this vid.